Alright everyone, welcome back to another And Now for Something Horrible. Today we're going to be talking about an entire order of insects called the Strepsipterans, these otherwise known as the twisted wing insects. They are a relatively small order comprising of about 600 species, and they are all parasites. And they are probably some of the most horrible parasites that you've ever heard of. So this is what the male looks like. This is a drawing of a male. I have a photo as well. They are extremely small. The males are the larger of the two. The females are extremely small. The males are half the size, a quarter of the size of like a paper wasp that you see building a nest on your porch or something. They're not very large, although they look kind of like flies in that they only have one set of wings, and they have these like halter-like structures on their forewings. They're actually very closely related to beetles. In fact, they're kind of the opposite wing structure of a fly. Normally, the flies have the forewings, and they're missing the back wings, whereas beetles have an elytra for the forewing, which in the case of the Strepsipteran has been reduced to just a nub, and the hind wings are exposed. In photographs, this is what the males look like. Again, very small. You can see the weave of the cloth here. But the other besides the twisted hind wings and the missing forewings, as seen here, the other notable things about them is that they have these enormous eyes. Sometimes they're referred to as raspberry eyes because they kind of look like a blackberry or a raspberry. They have enormous ommatidia, very bulging, these huge bulging bug eyes, and these very large flageolet antennae. Very strange looking creatures. But the female is even weirder. This is what the female looks like. This is an adult female. So this is adult female. And they never develop into the typical winged adult stage of an insect. They are permanently juvenile. And this is, usually this is called nyotnik or nyotnik. In that they go through not really a pupation. It's usually referred to as like a hypermetamorphosis, where you'll go from an egg to a larva with legs, and then to a larva without legs, to a larval adult female, again with legs. They're very strange. The males are free living in that they will leave their host. Like I said, this whole group is parasitic. And they usually develop within things like wasps and bees, some flies, a lot of leafhoppers. But they are more common in insects that have nests, like wasps and bees, because they're parasites. They find it easier to live in hosts with nests because there's more hosts in one area. But the adult males are free living. They will eventually leave their host and fly around looking for females to mate with. But the females never leave their host, and they're internal parasites. So how does this work? Where a male is flying around outside, and a female is living inside of a wasp, for instance. An adult female is living inside of a wasp. How do they reproduce? How do they go about living their life and things like that? So what happens is that once a female is an adult, she will kind of sever the membrane between the tergal abdominal plates of, let's say, a wasp or a bee in this case, and she will stick her head out. So this is her head. And, you see her head, and then you see some of her thorax. So this would be like a cephalothorax. And she will stick her head out, and she will begin emitting pheromones. And the males, which fly around free, they have the wings. They can smell her from a very long distance, and they will go up to her and mate with her head. And how this, or her head and her thorax. So in this video here, it's a little blurry, but it will become more clear as the male moves into focus. The male is here on the right, and this is not a female. This is a wasp or bee abdomen, and the female head is sticking out here. So what you'll see is the male will approach the wasp, of all things, and begin to try and mate with the female. And he will successfully mate with her head, or in between her head and her thorax. And what he's doing is actually a form of traumatic insemination. I talked about this a little bit with the bed bugs, but her reproductive system is not in her head. He is just mating directly with her bloodstream. So he is ejaculating through her skin or through her cuticle directly into her bloodstream. And this is how the mating occurs. His sperm will then work its way through her bloodstream to her reproductive canal and fertilize the eggs that way. So that's how the actual mating process works. The female will remain inside of the host. This is what the females inside of the wasp host look like. So it's just kind of a sclerotized cephalothorax here and a very soft fleshy body here. And what is happening after this mating process occurs is, so if we have, the female head, female body, sometimes they have legs, sometimes they don't. So this is her head. She seems happy, but she's not, because once her eggs are fertilized, they will hatch directly into her bloodstream. And so she'll have, her stomach and whatnot, her digestive tract and her organs and stuff. But the larvae, her babies, actually just swim around in her bloodstream, in her hemocoel, which is very strange. This is the only group of insects that do this. And then eventually, when they get old enough, they kill her. And what happens is they kill her, and then they erupt out of her head. And they begin crawling around the outside of the host. And so she's now dead. Her babies killed her. They're all dead. And the larvae, this is what the first instar larvae, they erupt out of her head, and they begin crawling around. This is why it's important that they parasitize things which live in close proximity, in nests and things like that, is because what they want to do is leave this host and get to another host. And in this stage, they have legs. And as soon as they get to another host, they burrow in to them, or they'll parasitize the eggs of the host and wait for one to hatch, and then they burrow into the new, freshly emerged host. And they immediately begin the hypermetamorphosis again, in which they lose their legs and begin feeding on their host. And what happens within the host's abdomen, for instance, so let's say that this is, a wasp abdomen. We'll put a little stinger on it. And you have a couple of these triungulate, or not triangulants, but the hypermetamorphized, never mind. That doesn't look right. You have these little parasites in there with which have gone through hypermetamorphosis. They secrete a bunch of compounds into the host, which the host will then begin to kind of form a tumor-like sac around them, and they irritate the host's immune system so that it forms the sac. But they just begin feeding on the sac, and they use the sac as protection. And they'll spend most of their life in this, where they go through their repeated moltings, and they keep their cast skins, and they form kind of a shell around themselves with their old cast skins. And they happily feed on the host tissue, feed on the host organs, until eventually the males will pupate and leave, and the females will then embed themselves sticking out of the host's backside so that the males can come and mate with her. And so it's this bizarre, cannibalistic, skull-splitting, blood-mating parasite that exists all around you. You just probably don't notice them. If you have a lot of wasps or bees around you, they are likely have these on their abdomens, and you just never noticed. And so you're just surrounded by these horrible creatures. So there you go, and I'll talk to you guys later.